Please ask him if he thinks what happened was fraud.
Yeah.
So Sam Bankman-Fried was found guilty on all 7 counts of fraud. Let's check out his body language. I believe there's things that people could have seen a long time ago. Let's get going.
What is this? And what did happen?
Look, thanks for having me. And at the end of the day, I was CEO of FTX.
In this first clip, you'll notice that Sam's eyes are mostly cast down through most of the interview. I think that's home for him. We know that in general, when your eyes are down, it's because you're having an internal conversation with yourself or you're visiting something emotional. He seems to be there a lot. And in this first clip, his head is shaking no as he's talking, because I believe that he cannot believe that this is happening, because not too long ago, he was on top of the world, one of the youngest billionaires ever. He can't believe this thing is falling apart. This is why he's shaking his head no. And he ends the clip by lifting his eyes up and opening his palms, which generally means that you've got nothing to hide. And he says, at the end of the day, I was CEO of FTS. And then his eyes divert from the camera again.
And at the end of the day, I was CEO of FTX.
Now in this next clip, watch how many times you see one shoulder go up as he's making points. Generally speaking, when one shoulder goes up, it means that they're hiding something. And notice that his head is shaking no the entire time he's listing off these entities that he's supposed to be responsible to, with that one shoulder popping up.
And that means whatever happened, wherever it happened, I had a duty. I had a duty to all of our stakeholders, to our customers, our creditors. I had a duty to our employees, to our investors, and to the regulators in the world.
This next clip is really interesting because it's all mixed up. You'll notice that his head is shaking no and his shoulder goes up as he's talking about being responsible to certain folks.
To do right by them, to make sure.
But then his head nods yes when he talks about being responsible to the company.
The right things happen to the company, and
which affects him personally. So his head goes from no to yes. Then you'll notice at the end he does a double shrug.
I made a lot of mistakes.
As he says, I made a lot of mistakes. Generally speaking, we know that one shoulder going up tends to be misleading. When it's both shoulders, it's I don't know, I don't understand, I don't have an answer, I don't know what to say. That's because that's being honest.
To do right by them, to make sure the right things happen to the company. And clearly I didn't do a good job of that. Clearly I made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes.
Pay attention to this next clip as he is explaining that his multi-billion-dollar company has fallen apart.
There are things I would give anything to be able to do over again. I didn't ever try to commit fraud on anyone. I was excited about the prospects of FTX a month ago. I saw it as a thriving, growing business. I was shocked by what happened this month.
And lastly, watch for a huge request for approval at the end, because he goes from explaining like this to looking up and raising his eyebrows as a request for approval. See if you catch it.
And, reconstructing it, where there are things I wish I had done differently.
Well, let's talk about some of the...
In this next clip, see if you can catch the 3 main things that happen. Here's what you're looking for. You're going to see him do an accidental confession when he says yeah, and he doesn't mean to, because he does an immediate correction. The next thing I want you to watch for is he will do some dispersion or diffusion of responsibility. This is called responsibility shifting. He'll take it from his own issue to it was a lot of other people's fault too. And then the last thing I want you to check out to see if you catch in this video is when he looks to the right, because he is either being coached from the right or he has some type of a note board or something on the right, because when he makes very critical statements, you'll notice multiple times in this video and in a couple of the other clips that his eyes go to the right and he comes back to make sure if he's saying the right thing.
Please ask him if he thinks what happened was fraud. What do you tell this man?
Yeah, I'm deeply sorry about what happened. Here's, the long and short of what happened. Over the course of the last year, there were a number of market crashes that drove the value of those assets down and the leverage up.
Now in this next clip, I want you to notice that as he is asked about accountability and oversight About halfway through the clip, you'll notice that his right arm starts to shake. It starts to shake, starts to have that nervous twitch. See if you catch it. This is nervous energy escaping. When we are in very, very stressful situations and we don't know how to react, we go into fight or flight. It's actually freeze, flight, or fight. But when we go into that, he can't really freeze up because it's going to look weird. He can't run away. And he can't really fight, so all that energy has to go somewhere. You'll notice that it comes out as his arm begins to twitch and shake about halfway through this discussion.
No board, no CFO, and you said something which I think raised a lot of eyebrows here. You said you thought you had too many boards.
Yeah. We had, I think, more than a dozen boards when you look at all of the entities put together. And, many of these boards had regulatory functions. I think the problem to some extent was, okay, sure, you have all these boards, but...
And there is a huge responsibility shift as he says, there is a diffusion of responsibility to some extent.
At the end of the day, when push comes to shove, who's the person who's in charge of global, or the board, or the function that's in charge of, global site customer risk management? There's a diffusion of responsibility to some extent.
Two things you need to be watching for in this next clip. His arm goes from shaking and his hands move up his lap. This is, again, one of these pacifiers. I went over this in other videos. When we pacify our body, it's also called self-soothing. It can come in many different forms, but in this one, his hands go up on his thighs and his elbows perch out like this. And he begins to squeeze his thighs as he's looking for some way to release that nervous energy. He wants this interview over.
When I was looking for how can I, in a way which is truthful, but paint FTX as compelling a way as possible, as exciting and optimistic a way as possible. And I wasn't thinking about it, I wasn't talking about what are the risks involved with FTX, there.
And notice at the very end how his eyes are down and then he looks up through his lids and kind of does one of these and does a head shake as he's looking for approval. It's yet another request for approval.
I obviously wish that I'd spent more time dwelling on the downsides and less time thinking about the upsides.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
In this last short clip, see if you notice when he has that moment, because his head's going to go from this to It's really communicating, I am so thankful that this is over. He wants this thing over so bad. His nervous energy was going through the roof in this video, and he is very, very happy that it's finally over. See if you catch when his head drops.
Sam Bankman-Fried, I want to thank you for this interview. I hope that some of the answers have been helpful as we've tried to understand and untangle what is a still tangled story.
Well, the sentencing won't happen for several months, and in the meantime, I'm sure there'll be more of him in the news. Do me a favor, if you made it this far, see how many things you caught. And while you're still here, do me a favor, click on one of these other videos, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.